Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and David. I'm Brad Carlyon, your Navajo County Attorney.
I'm David Clouse, your Navajo County Sheriff.
And as our guest this month, we have Roxanne with Navajo County Victim Services and Nikki, who's one of the victim advocates. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Roxanne, what do the Navajo County Victim Services do?
Well, we handle a range of services. So primarily our advocates go to court, so we handle criminal justice advocacy. That's kind of the foundation of what we do as a victim services department. But recently, due to grant funding, we've been able to expand our program to where now we can offer 24/7 crisis response to victims of crime on scene when called by law enforcement or if a victim just needs help.
Let me go back first. You said you provide advocacy services. What do you mean by that? What are advocacy services?
Our job is to support victims of crime, to provide them emotional services, to keep them informed of what's happening through the criminal justice process, also to make sure that they're getting all of their rights that are awarded to them by the Arizona Constitution, and just to be there to kind of educate them and make sure that they have a voice through that process and that they get the help and the services that they need.
So what are some of the examples of actual advocacy that you engage in with victims of crime?
So we would meet with a victim, and first of all, we would educate them about their victims' rights. Most people don't know that until you have become a victim.
So what are some of the rights?
You have the right, first and foremost, to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. You have the right to confer with a prosecutor about a plea offer, to be present for any hearing that a defendant is present in, to make a victim impact statement if the offender is ever going to be released or sentenced or there's a change of plea on the hearing. You have a right to be actively involved in the criminal prosecution of a case. You also have the right to make victim impact statements and to address the court. Those are kind of some of the more pertinent rights.
So as the law enforcement side, myself and deputies and police agencies, when we go to a call for service where there's a victim involved, we give them a pamphlet, right? Which relates back to your office, and we call it victims rights, where we issue the date and the time. And it's a very lengthy pamphlet, a lot to read and small print, but you guys are there more to interpret or to explain that pamphlet to them?
Right, and to just educate them about what it is that they're allowed to do, and to make sure that if there's something that is important to them, I always like to focus back. What does justice mean to an individual? And that can mean very different things for lots of different people. So let's figure out what that is with my knowledge and education of the criminal justice system, of how investigations are handled, and I just listen to their story, provide crisis counseling services, hear what it is that they have to say, what's important to them, and then through my knowledge and education, I call it anticipating a victim's needs. From my years back in customer service, we had that kind of role. They don't know necessarily what's out there or what it is they need. It's our job to listen to their story and help provide them that support and resources.
Do they have to affirmatively invoke their rights?
They do, but that's what they use that sheet for. So there is at the bottom, there's an opt-in and opt-out little checkbox that the officer will help them fill out, and with that, that's submitted to the county attorney's office. And if they don't want their rights, they don't have to have those either.
Can they invoke their rights at a later time if they change their mind, or vice versa?
Yes, at any point they can say, hey, I wasn't clear, or I didn't understand what my rights were. I would like to be informed and provided information about what's going on.
What type of crimes trigger a person's right to have victim rights? Is it all crimes? Because you got things from misdemeanors up to felonies, or is it just certain type of crimes?
It's all crimes. That is designated by the Arizona Revised Statute, which is kind of a technical term. But if a crime has been committed and that has been reported to law enforcement, misdemeanors, juvenile delinquency cases, felony superior court cases, we handle all of those. And I mean, we're talking crime types from burglary, criminal damage, threatening and intimidating, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, homicides. Those are all types of crimes that we provide services on.
So about how many cases a year do your office handle?
Well, our department sees about 1,500 victims in a year on average. But that varies through about 26 different types of crime types. We provide services of that particular level.
So what type of crimes generate the most victims for your office to help?
Domestic violence, absolutely.
And you had talked about you've added some new resources through grant funding for crisis response. What is a crisis response?
So a crisis response advocate provides advocacy services that are kind of different than what we would call system-based advocates, which are your criminal justice advocates who go to court. And they are actually trained to provide trauma-informed care, to be there to provide like crisis counseling services to a victim who is in trauma or who is in crisis, who might have some underlying issues or depression. They are able to focus and help that particular person. And our goal at the beginning of that crime is to make sure whatever that victim needs, those are the resources they get, which it can be as small as I have a person here and we're going to be doing an investigation that might last 6 to 8 hours. We need this person to hang around and they don't have a warm jacket. We can bring a warm jacket. We can bring water. Are they safe? Do they have a safe place to go? Do they need to go into shelter? Do they need to have an exam, some type of forensic exam, whether it be strangulation or a sexual assault exam? Do they need a forensic interview? Those are all kinds of the things that we orchestrate and assist with.
So, you talk about that crisis response. What does a response look like? I know it's not going to come at Monday at 8 a.m.
No.
But what are some of those I guess, what does it look like as far as the victim?
How do you get called out?
So we get called out by officers primarily, but we have had victims show up to our center and receive services if they don't want to report. And I guess I should mention that it's not a requirement to get advocacy services that you have to report to law enforcement. There are some exceptions. There's mandated reporting requirements for child abuse cases, but for adult cases, any victim of any type of crime can come to the center and get the assistance that they need through our advocates without having to file a report through law enforcement. But the majority of our cases do come from the police telling us, I have a victim here, we're processing an investigation, they need assistance, can you come help this victim? And then it can come at 2 a.m, it could come Friday at 6 o'clock at night, and you're waking up and you're a little bit sleepy, but you pick up and you drive where you need to go and provide those services.
You said they can come to the center. What is the center and where is the center located? So
we have 2 victim services / FAC family advocacy centers, one in Sholo and one in Holbrook. The Holbrook address is 121 West Buffalo Street. It's attached to the Holbrook Justice Court. And then the address for the Sholo office is 902 East Joseph Clubs. And that's where the Family Advocacy Center is located. We only have people physically there, of course, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. But we respond after hours as well by request.
All right, so a deputy has called you out to a scene, and I'm going to give this to Nikki because you're one of these crisis responders. You get that call at 2 a.m. What happens?
You answer the phone call. Usually it's from law enforcement. You get the information about, is the scene secure? Is the suspect in custody? Do you know where he's located? Is it safe for me to come out? Once you get that okay, then you start putting into action. So I have a 4-year-old, so I have to make sure that he's safe, right? So that I have childcare during that week that I'm on call. And I get him set up wherever he needs to go. Usually it's with his father. And then I get dressed and I let them know, hey, I let the law enforcement officer know, hey, it's going to be 20 minutes or it's going to be 45 minutes, just so they have an estimated time of arrival for me to get out there. I grab my go bag, which is full of water, snacks, things for kids in case there's a kid that needs to be entertained. So like coloring books, crayons, that type of thing. Kleenexes. I have my mask now with COVID. And then I just get in my car and I go and I respond out to the scene. I meet with law enforcement usually first, just to let them know that, hey, I'm here, and then they'll introduce me normally to the victim, and then from there I'll sit with the victim and I'll do the trauma-informed care.
Does law enforcement give you much of a background on what has occurred and what's going on?
I get little details. I don't have like a full story usually.
Does that help or hinder, do you think?
I think that it can help. If I need more information, then I'll ask more information. Usually they'll say, I have a domestic violence victim, this is her age, just the basic details. If it's a strangulation, they'll tell me that there was strangulation involved. Just different things to kind of give me just the minimum amount of details that I need to do my job. And then I'll go out and respond, and I'll talk to the victim. And a lot of the time, they'll dispose their story to me from there, if they feel it's appropriate.
Yeah. So do the requests from law enforcement come with different asks or needs that they need on each different response?
Yeah, it definitely varies from law enforcement agency to the officer to the situation at hand. So it just completely varies on what they need.
What are some of the asks or duties that they ask you to help with the victims?
A lot of the time it's the getting them to a point where they can process what's going on, so that crisis intervention, taking them from this level of trauma to a kind of more level state where their brain can kind of process the stuff that's being told to them. So getting them to a more level state most of the time.
I know one of the big asks or big benefits that you guys or services you provide for law enforcement is oftentimes rides. These events or these crimes are committed at times when it's most likely most inconvenient. No money, no place to stay, no vehicle, no place to get to and from to appointments or to get to report a crime. And so you guys provide a lot of that transportation, shelter, food, and support services that helps us, focus on the investigation, making sure we gather all the facts, and then we know that the victim is being taken care of. Mm-hmm. And then when they're back at us stabilized, and we can start those interviews and processing of collection of evidence, maybe with a strangulation case or...
Correct.
You talked about the victims oftentimes opening up to you. What they tell you, is that private, or is that something you share with the law enforcement officer or the prosecutor? So
everything that is told to us is confidential, with the exception of like exculpatory evidence or mandated reporting. So if
when you say exculpatory evidence, what do you mean by that?
Exculpatory evidence, the way that I've had it explained to me, is basically anything that could get the suspect out of trouble. Okay. So that's the way that I can understand it.
And the mandatory reporting part that you talked about?
The mandatory reporting would be any type of child abuse or something where the kids aren't safe. That would fall into the mandatory reporting.
But the rest of it you have to keep private and confidential and don't share with anybody?
Correct, unless they ask me to, or unless I ask them permission.
So they can waive that then?
That's correct.
We're talking a bit about domestic violence. Roxanne said that's one of the biggest crime that you respond to. There would probably be special needs there because they may not be able to stay in that place. There may be issues regarding when that suspect's released, may not have a job. I know that's part of the controlling factor. What are some of the things you look for and try to provide assistance with on those domestic violence cases in particular?
We definitely look at, are they safe? Do they have a safe place to go? If not, then we'll start looking at our partner agencies with shelter, where they're going to feel safe. Are they going to feel safer in Winslow? Are they going to feel safer in the Pine Top Lakeside area? Where are they going to feel the most safe? And then we'll kind of go from there, start getting that stuff set up for them. If they have animals, we recently found out animals are a big thing for domestic violence, and so we have some new resources for animals that we didn't really have prior to being faced with animals, dogs and things of that matter, because a lot of shelters can't take animals.
What about livestock?
Yeah.
Livestock.
I had a request recently to board a horse for somebody, and we find resources. That's the good thing about living in a smaller community.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah. And the one good thing about the crisis response advocates is we don't just go out that day. We're a permanent contact for that victim. We work with these victims for years. I still communicate with victims that I first interacted with from the very first time I started as an advocate. So it gives that person just that resource, because especially with domestic violence, I always say it's not a sprint, this is a marathon. And there's lots of steps that need to be taken every day to ensure that victim's safety. And navigating that process can be very confusing, it can be very trying, it's very emotional for them. It's like a wave, right? Sometimes they feel very strong and other times they feel very weak. They need some of that reassurance that they're doing the right things and that they're able to make the best decisions for themselves and their children.
Yep.
I know there's not every scenario is different, but what's one of the most helpful things you guys have found helping these victims of domestic violence to overcome this, or to get out of a abusive relationship?
Support. They need a lot of support.
Yes, just having us there as a presence. I tell my advocates when they first start, if all you do is listen, you've done your job. People need to be heard. They need to have their story heard. Everybody has they might need different types of resources. Some people have really strong families. They might not need all of the services that we offer, and that's okay. As long as they're reassured and then they're guided and they're able to kind of share their story with someone, then we have pretty much done our job.
I remember one of the very first crisis response that your team did was a homicide-suicide call with a young boy present who witnessed it all. In cases like that, can you get them help and assistance to deal with that trauma, saying their mother killed by the boyfriend?
Yes, absolutely.
So what were you able to do in that case or other similar type of cases?
So with that family, I know that young boy, he has actually referred to a system called Advocacy, and I don't know the acronym for it, but what they specialize in is they do personal advocacy for child victims of domestic violence homicide cases. And so they kind of pick up where we leave off, and referrals is a huge thing we do. If we don't provide that direct service, we send them to a resource or location that can help provide that. They get them into therapy. They make sure that they're adjusting, even if they move, right? Sometimes you have with his particular situation, he no longer could even live in Navajo County, so he has to relocate to a place where he can be with family, and learning to make those adjustments and just having that support system.
And even though he moved out of Navajo County, did your team continue to provide resources and help, or did you hand the baton off to the victim services and wherever he moved to?
Well, it kind of is like a back and forth, and it depends on each situation. But with that particular case, there was also the criminal justice aspect of it, which is where my advocates will be much more informed. And there was an investigation. I don't know that we ever had a case to prosecute, but there was a communication or conversations going back and forth between the family and the law enforcement agency that we helped guide them through. So we kind of partner with these systems. So Advocacy might take the counseling side of things, the personal advocacy side of things, and then we'll handle the more legal investigative side of things.
I think this is going to be one of my next questions. Is a lot of these services are not provided by your office alone, right?
Correct.
There's a lot of true partnerships I think you have with private organizations, churches, and other government organizations.
Yes.
To make that, who are some of those partners you have here in Navajo County that support you guys in your
Well, first and foremost, I would have to say the shelter programs. Alice's Place, the White Mountain Safe House, we are all big supporters of one another. They do amazing work, and the one thing I would like to mention about the services that they provide, so many people who are in domestic violence situations feel like going to shelter is meaning that they have to go into temporary housing. No, these shelters will help them the same way we help them, with safety planning, helping them get on their feet, giving them room and board overnight. They don't have to go into shelter to receive similar services through the shelters. We have Advocacy. As I've mentioned, we partner with all of our law enforcement officers. They're really great. They sit in our MDT.
What is an MDT?
Multidisciplinary team.
And what does an MDT do?
We meet on cases to see how we can better serve our victims that we assist, and we discuss, this is where maybe we could have done this better, or this is what we did really great.
And not just victim services, but all the participants in a criminal investigation action.
That's correct.
Yeah, I've sat on those meetings and that team before. That's a big multi-discipline. So who are some of those team members that make up that team?
Right. We have all of our law enforcement agencies across Navajo County, and then we have mental health services, so Change Point, the shelters come, we have Summit Healthcare that attends, and then the Family Advocacy Center attends. Occasionally we'll get the FBI there, occasionally. But it's a whole bunch of us that come and gather to make best practice decisions moving forward so that we can have the most effective team across Navajo County.
And I think one of the most beneficial things, part of that team too, is you guys kind of do a breakdown of cases, what went well, what didn't go well, how how did we fail in this area, and how do we not have that happen again, type of stuff. Right. Which is always beneficial, and it only helps the victims, and it helps the citizens of the county. Correct. Every time you guys meet, and it's a great team.
I would love to get the schools on board.
Yeah.
Working on that.
We'll figure out a way to do that. We talked a lot about domestic violence, and we're recording this in October, which is Domestic Violence Month. What are some of the things going on to help raise awareness of domestic violence and things that you are involved with?
So from the victim services side, because Nikki also represents the Family Advocacy Center, we love Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It gives us this time or this space where we can actually have these conversations and make sure that people in the community are aware of this issue, that we never let it fall or lay flat, that we're always keeping this particular topic relevant. So if you happen to go through Holbrook, at the corner of Holbrook, the whole corner is lit purple for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it's a pretty nice display.
It's very pretty.
Very pretty, yes. In addition to that, it's been a little harder this year because of COVID-19. We would normally do a lot more get-together type awareness events, but because we weren't able to, Nicole came up with a brilliant idea for Domestic Violence Awareness Month called a porch parade, and I'll let her talk about that.
Well, it wasn't my idea. It was one of our volunteers at the Family Advocacy Center, and she is actually an event producer. And she said, I want to partner with the Family Advocacy Center, with Victim Services, and I want to do this porch parade. And Roxanne was like, let's do it for domestic violence awareness. And so I just kind of hit the ground running with it, and we got some amazing sponsors to help support the porch parade. What it is it's decorating your home or your business or lawn or whatever you can in the color purple to honor domestic violence awareness and to support the victims and survivors of domestic violence.
So all these places with purple lights and purple yard decorations, that's what all this is about.
That's correct, yep. And Culver's, if you haven't been inside, I suggest to go inside because they have it massively purple.
Oh, really? And, I know the state and law enforcement and a lot of the victim services have all made that push, Light Up Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona purple.
Lighting Arizona purple.
Yeah.
And then October 22nd is
Wear Purple Day.
Wear Purple Day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And our office, the county attorney's office, we are taking a picture wearing purple shirts, an aerial view picture on Monday.
We partnered with the sheriff's office to borrow one of their drones so we can get that aerial photo.
Right.
Yes.
That's going to be awesome.
In addition to that, we were very lucky. We've been partnering with the Holbrook Chamber every year. They usually do their Old West Fest the first week of October, and they run a marathon, and they donate those proceeds over to the Victim Services and the Family Advocacy Center, a portion of those proceeds. And so they've already ran that event. That happened, I think, on the 6th. Yeah. But it was a run for Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
So in addition, I know lighting up purple, these are all outward things, and wearing purple. What are some things that people can do specifically to help you guys or to help law enforcement with this awareness?
I think participating and just having conversations and being aware of what domestic violence is, having an understanding of that, because if you are a victim of domestic violence, you will need help. It's nearly impossible to get out of that relationship without assistance. So many of the people we work with, we're not just working with that victim, we're working with the family, we're working with the community, and making people aware when they notice these red flags, even in their relationships. Victims might not always understand or label themselves as a victim. Maybe their relationship's a little bit bad, but outsiders might be able to have this perspective that they're not seeing within themselves, and having those conversations with them, and also with your children.
Because I was going to add that too.
Yeah, so many of our victims have entered into a lot of these relationships at a pretty young age, 17 years old. Ideally, I would love to even have a school curriculum to talk about this issue, because I don't think that children are really informed about it, but just being aware, knowing about these services, so whenever there is somebody that they know, they can help them contact us or reach out for those types of things.
And I'll add, Bloom 365 is a great resource for parents wanting to talk to their kids about domestic violence. They have a peer-to-peer program. It's based in the schools, and it's an incredible way to look at things. They use a flower, and they have all of the things that create like this abusive pattern, and it's a wilting flower. And then they have a flower that's blooming, and they're talking about like what makes a healthy relationship and what contributes to these healthy relationships. So being able to have those conversations with your children starting at those teen years is vital, because they may not realize that they're controlling, right? So you can get to that, or being controlled. So you can get to both sides of it and hit it from both ends, and hopefully eventually we'll have a life without domestic violence.
Well, thank you both. The time has flown by, and thank you for joining us for this month's Shooting Straight with Brad and David.